Good evening, everybody. Let's please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silence for the following. David Propeter, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Harold DeReich, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Patricia Sabatka, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Thomas Fredette, a retiree of the North Syracuse Central School District. Joseph Durenchko, a retiree of the North Syracuse Central School District. Gary Pudney, a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. And David Ozinski Jr., a graduate of the North Syracuse Central School District. Thank you. Yeah.
I want to talk about one of these people because I knew him very personally. Joseph Durenchko was a science teacher. I believe he started at North Syracuse High School when it was a high school, and then he later went to CNS. He was a science teacher. I know Dale Hester and Jim Wenham were all part of that group. Outstanding teacher. But more importantly, he stood up for the teachers and stood up for the students in 1976 when he went on strike with many of us, when we had a Board of Education and we had a superintendent that didn't put students up there like we do. And he was one of the 7 that happened to have to go to jail, but he did that because he believed in what the cause was. And he was a wonderful gentleman.
Okay, we have 3 presentations tonight. The first 2 are proclamations, and I'm going to read them both, and then Mr. Bowles and I will go up to present the certificates. The first one we have is for Athletic Trainer Appreciation Day. Throughout our school buildings, athletic trainers have an impact on the district's students, athletes. They have accepted this exceptional responsibility with commitment, dedication, and love. The athletic trainers of the North Syracuse Central School District are professionals of the highest caliber and have dedicated themselves to the ideals of their profession. Students, parents, administrators, and community members recognize, applaud, and appreciate their efforts to ensure safety of student athletes. To honor the athletic trainers of the North Syracuse Central School District and their accomplishments, I, Michael Maurizio, Vice President of the Board of Education of the North Syracuse Central School District, on behalf of the board, express our deepest gratitude and hereby declare March 7th, 2023 as Athletic Trainer Appreciation Day to be celebrated with appropriate educational activities. Do I have a motion? Mr. Thorne, Ms. Kruger, all those in favor? Passed. Our second proclamation is for School Social Worker Appreciation Day. Throughout our school buildings, school social workers have an impact on the district's students and families. They have accepted this exceptional responsibility with commitment, dedication, and love. The school social workers of the North Syracuse Central School District are professionals of the highest caliber and have dedicated themselves to the ideals of their profession. Students, parents, administrators, and community members recognize, applaud, and appreciate their efforts to ensure students receive quality services. To honor the school social workers of the North Syracuse Central School District and their accomplishments, I, Michael Maurizio, Vice President of the Board of Education of the North Syracuse Central School District, on behalf of the board, express our deepest gratitude and hereby declare March 21st, 2023 as School Social Worker Appreciation Day to be celebrated with appropriate educational activities. Do I have a motion? Mr. Crabtree, Dr. Kramer, all those in favor? That's passed.
So on behalf of the district and the board, we'd like to have Mr. Kurilla accept certificates for the athletic trainers I know they are not here, so Mr. Krillo, thank you.
They're actually working.
Okay. There we go. Thank you very much. Also for social workers, do we have social workers here tonight? I don't see any social workers. So Mr. Krillo, on behalf of the social workers in the district, I want to say thank you for their service and what they do for all the students in the district. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we're going to turn it over to Mr. Keegan for our initial budget draft for this upcoming year.
Good evening. And I'm going to turn it back over to Superintendent Bowles and ask if he could lead us off here.
Thank you, Mr. Keegan. So as you know, we always start our season with an initial draft, and we wanted to let the community and the board know what we're working on, what we have currently, and where we need to get to. So again, we have for our agenda considerations that are impacting the 2023-2024 budget. We're going to be looking at our estimated revenues. We'll be looking at the tax cap calculation, initial expenses, federal stimulus, vehicle bond proposition, fund balance and reserves, vote and election information, and the budget process timeline. So as you've seen before, things that we're looking at for the 23-24 budget, we're going to use our strategic plan as a compass, looking at our mission and goals and looking at the areas to focus on in order to educate the students in the district. The 6 areas we're going to look at: cultural competency, student support systems, professional learning, graduation rate, reading proficiency, and emotional competency. There are some images here along the way that we have in our strategic plan and stay brighter together. But some of the considerations that we're looking at, trying to operate in a highly inflationary environment right now, and due to the tax cap, we are unable to pass the increased cost onto the local taxpayers. We have federal stimulus aid that will be ending. We've talked to you about ARP and we've talked about CURSA, and that one will be ending in September of 2023, the other in September of 2024. Our budget must include strategies for sustaining critical areas or initiatives. The economy is at full unemployment. Sorry about that. The district must attract and retain the best people that are out there while fostering a work environment that is conducive to collaboration and ongoing professional development. There are a number of labor contracts that will be negotiated this year and the balance of next year, and our budget will reflect higher labor costs. And after years of declining enrollment, we believe that the enrollment is starting to level off, but may begin to grow again. We're still undetermined as how Micron will be impacting our area and begin the construction and facilities even further. So we need to continue to look at our student population. Inflation. This is a graph looking at inflation. All items, 6.4% increase. Food has gone up 10.1%. Energy has gone up 8.7%. All items less food and energy, 5.6%. All things impact our budget. So just some images and some things that we have students are looking at technology and robotics, but Don is going to take you through the federal stimulus funds so that you can have a deep dive.
Thanks, Dan. As you know, we've been so fortunate to receive federal stimulus funds to help with our recovery from COVID. And you've seen this slide before with a slight modification. As Dan mentioned, we're going to lose the CRSA, that's the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation. We're going to lose that effectively at the end of this school year. We got a little bit of money we're going to use over the summer to support some programming, but after this year, we won't have those funds. Those funds currently support 31.5 FTE. So that's a lot of personnel, critical personnel, covering all the initiatives, all the goal areas of our strategic plan. As outlined here, academic recovery and instructional support and SEL and health services. Next year, the year we're budgeting for, we'll finish up using the American Rescue Plan money. That's the ARP funding. And that supports 25 FTE. So, we've got our goal is to try to sustain all these important efforts in our general fund budget. And so that's a big factor, is just looking at these federal stimulus funds and trying to work them into the budget. Dan mentioned that the labor market's extremely tight, and all of us here, I don't care where you work at North Syracuse, we're all feeling this. I know there's a lot of numbers on this chart, and I know you've seen this chart before, but to have unemployment levels that are under 3% is just unheard of. And as you can see, it's not appeared here since 2015. And the federal government considers 4.1 to 4.7% full employment. So it's extremely tight, and we value our people, and we really have to make sure we're attracting, as Dan said, the best people and retaining people in a very, very tight labor market. And that's going to be a factor as we put the final touches on this budget. Another chart that you've seen before, and it was in the opening, you saw that as we look at enrollment, yes, our enrollment has declined, but the socioeconomic status of our community has also declined, as we have we're serving now maybe a more needy community than we had historically, as well as our students with disability. The percentage of students as well as the number has increased despite our enrollment declining. Again, emphasizing the degree of difficulty of the work that our teachers and staff have to, do each year in servicing our students. And then we have the addition of our English language learners. This population requires, as the board knows, additional staffing and supports. And we're so lucky to have these people in our community, but they require additional resources. And again, as we navigate through the budget, we're trying to make sure that we're supporting all these groups effectively, and that has economic implications. Just overviewing our revenue assumptions quickly. New York State's current financial condition is actually very good. And they are committed to fully funding our foundation aid. And therefore, you're going to see in a future chart, and the board has already seen, that we got a significant increase in our state aid this year to top off our foundation aid. However, due to the loss of the federal funding in 24 and 25, New York State's projecting that they're going to have deficits. And we're concerned about what the years after next year, the 24, 25 and beyond school years are going to look like. And, when we do our business plan or budget, it's certainly we're very much focused on the next school year, but we have to look out several years. So because many of the initiatives that we're working on, it take years to develop. And so we are very concerned about what New York State's economic situation is going to be in the future. Building aid this year, we're expecting an increase because we've completed Bear Road, and some of the aid from the projects that we've been working on are kicking in, and we're seeing that increase we saw the increase this year, and we'll see an additional increase next year. Property taxes. Everybody wants to know, what our tax levy is going to be. Our tax levy, we're living under the tax cap. And so the biggest component of that is what's called the allowable levy growth factor based on inflation. And so it's the lower of 2% or inflation. And so we're going to use 2% for the 23-24 school year. And That's 4.4% lower than inflation. This is our second year in a row where we've had a tax levy lower than inflation. So we have to absorb those additional price increases, so to speak, in our budget. Federal stimulus aid, we've talked a lot about that going away next year and the year after. So looking at our revenues, you can see the pink portion of the pie, if it projects as pink or purple. That represents about 50%. Our tax levy represents about 50% of our revenues. General state aid represents 43% and building aid about 1.85%. Those are the green, the slice of blue, and the pink are the majority of our revenues. We do have a few other things that weigh in. And I want to explain that fund balance. We're going to come back to fund balance and talk about that, but that's the next biggest component at $5.2 million. And so everybody knows we put these budgets together and we're very thoughtful. We work with our administrators and our department chairs and our building principals and directors, and everybody puts a lot of thought and work into putting the budget together. But the reality of it is, budgets, when the school year starts, we have to deal with the reality of students moving into our districts and situations changing and energy costs going up and a variety of things. And so at the end of every year, we often have a little bit extra money at the end of the year that goes into our fund balance. And in recognition of that, we plan on spending some of our fund balance to support the following year's budget. And so, with respect to the taxpayers agree to a tax levy and they don't want us to overtax them. So what we do is we make sure that if there is any amount of extra revenue, it goes into fund balance, and then we try to use that in the following year. And that's the next biggest component. We receive money for some rent. We rent our facilities to BOCES for programs that they host here. We have pilot revenues, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the presentation when we talk about Micron. We get Medicaid revenues. We provide Medicaid services to students, and we receive revenues for that. And of course, we receive sales taxes and interest income. This is a chart that just compares the two. And as I mentioned early on, we've got a significant increase in general state aid, and that is substantially, almost entirely due to foundation aid. That's a very large increase in our state aid. And we've got an increase in building aid there, as you can see underneath the subtotal, and then our tax levy. We're looking at a tax levy increase of 3.22%, and I'll show you a chart that calculates that in a moment. So here's that chart, and it shows our levy for the current year, the 22-23 year, at $98.5 million at the top there. We have a thing called the tax-based growth factor, which is interesting. New York State publishes these tax-based growth factors, and what they look at is the expansion of our district and the need to increase the tax levy to recognize that there's new neighborhoods that we have to drive buses through. There's other growth in our tax base that requires us to service the community. So we're allowed to increase the tax levy by a small percentage as a result of that. We consider our pilot revenues and our local share of capital projects. Those are the next two components in the tax cap calculation. And then that allowable levy growth factor, you can see that's 1.02. That's the 2% in the 2% tax cap. And so we end up with if you work your way through the calculations, you end up with a tax levy limit of $101.7 million, or an increase of about almost 3.2 million, or 3.22%. And that represents about a $71.40 increase for a $100,000 home before STAR. And that's important to emphasize, before STAR. What does it look like for our towns? When we consider our towns, as you know, the school district's not involved in the assessments. We don't assess properties, and we don't look at that. So we look at the full value of property. And so when considering the full value of a $100,000 home, whether you live in Cicero, Clay, or Salina, the estimated school tax is going to be the same dollar amount, $2,162. And again, it's about a $68 to $71 increase. We're still fine tuning that, but that's listed here on the bottom to show you what it means per year and per month. About 3.22% increase. Switching over to expenditures, the district's very lucky. We have we're self-insured for our health benefits. And we are very lucky to have a good health oversight committee that looks at our health benefits. That's a group of administrators and members of our teachers union that watch our health benefit plan closely. And in recent years, we've done an excellent job of managing that in a manner that has given us below market increases. However, as maybe part of the inflationary environment we're working in, our consultants are now projecting an increase for next year that at this time looks like about a 10.9% increase. They'll continue to look at that over the next several months and try to project what our health benefits will be. And hopefully that rate will come down before we finalize our budget. Our retirement costs, another big component of our budget. Again, we're extremely lucky to be in New York State, where we have the teachers' retirement system and the employee retirement system, two systems that are incredibly well managed and fully funded. And what that means, that's not only good for our employees, but it's good for the district and for our taxpayers, because these plans are fully funded. We're paying each year into those systems in a manner that allows us not have to worry about paying for retirees who are already retired. So if you're a retiree in New York State in one of these systems, the district has already paid those costs. We're not paying those retirees in the future. It's not a burden we have to bear. We fully funded the plan while people were working, and that's really important. The assets are very well managed, and we're looking at an increase in TRS. I'm sorry, a decrease in TRS funding. It's going down from 10.29% of payroll to 9.76% of payroll, and that's great. ERS is going up slightly from 11.6 to 13.1%. But again, very well managed plans, very predictable cost, and we've got those well provided for. Salaries and wages, as Dan mentioned, we've got several units, and we've listed them here, where their contracts are going to be renegotiated in the 23-24 school year, and those contracts are going to have increases of 3.35% next year. And contracts that are expiring at the end of this year are for our M&O, bus mechanics, and office personnel, and middle managers, principals, directors, and per diem subs. And we're going to be negotiating those, and those will impact our 23-24 budget, but yet to be determined the impact, because we haven't concluded those negotiations. Fuel costs have increased significantly or consistently over the past few years. It's been a pretty volatile market, as you know. In the last year, it's come down quite a bit. In the year before that, it's gone up, and so we've really struggled to budget properly for fuel costs. I think actually this year we'll probably be running over our budget a little bit, and we're working to project those costs for the budget next year. Energy costs, we are part of what's called the New York State Municipal Energy Consortium. And we're in 3-year supply. We have a 3-year supply agreement that goes through next year, so our budget will reflect those contracted rates. And we've actually done quite well with that. We locked in the rates before energy costs went up significantly. So this is our expenditure budget. We're a people-based business, so it makes sense that the most significant pieces of the pie are the blue and the green. The salaries and benefits represent the most of our budget. We'll spend the next biggest piece is BOCES, where we work with them on cooperative services, and that's about $22.9 million. Big components to service our special ed population, our technology, and our instructional programs. The benefit of BOCES is that we work collaboratively with the other 22 component. There's 23 component districts. 22 component districts collaborate with us, and we're able to offer our students services that we wouldn't otherwise be able to without BOCES. We also get some price advantages because of the consolidated purchasing power. And finally, we get BOCES aid, which is a big benefit to the district. Here's a comparison of some of the costs. And these numbers might be a little shocking. And I want to go back to my comment about incorporating CURSA spending into our budget this year. So our salaries are going up 6.72%, but they're only going up 3.35% contractually. Yes, we did hire additional employees to deal with our English language learner population, additional special ed students that moved into the district, and some other needs that we had. But the big bump in there is adding all of the folks that are paid under CURSA to our salaries budget. Same thing with benefits. As I mentioned to you, it's about 10.9% increase in benefits, but you see a slightly higher impact due to adding the CURSA folks into there. Debt service is up, but debt service is up because our Bear Road project is completed and we have to pay the debt now associated with that project, and we're getting aid commensurate with that. Contractual costs have gone up. This includes, again, expenses associated with our CURSA costs that we've transferred into the budget. Also, we've got the cost of the additional SROs, the full year effect of that. And BOCES, as I mentioned, we continue to invest heavily in programs at BOCES, particularly in special ed and technology, and then supplies and other are up primarily due to inflation. So in addition to the general fund budget, again, this is our general fund budget. We aspire to have a budget at this stage of the game of around $204,967,000, an increase of about $16.5 million or 8.81%. I want to drop back real quick to our revenues and just point out that our revenues currently are at $202,870, which is about $2 million short of our expenditures. So that's the challenge. We often come into our initial budget with a deficit. This year's no different. And we've got some work to do over the next 6 weeks before the board adopts the budget to close that gap. In addition to the general fund spending and revenues, which we've covered, we also will ask the voters to continue a vehicle bonding or consider a vehicle bonding proposition. Obviously, we're trying to maintain our fleet so that it's safe and reliable and cost effective to maintain. And the trick there is to not have too many buses that are over 10 years old. We've been purchasing gasoline buses, and we're proposing another 10 65-passenger gasoline buses next year, 2 42-passenger special needs buses with wheelchair lifts and air conditioning, and then 6 M&O vehicles, a plow truck, some service vans, a couple of service vans, I should say, 2 of them, and 4 grounds vehicles for an estimated cost of $2.4 million. And the impact after transportation aid is about $3.82 for a household assessed at $100,000 before STAR. Now, you've heard about the transition to electric vehicles. So under the law, all school district purchases of new vehicles must be zero emission or electric vehicles by July of 27. We have this option to extend it by 2 years to July of 29. But by then we have to be purchasing electric vehicles, and all of our vehicles by July of 35 need to be electric. And so we've been doing a lot of research. We've actually ridden on some electric buses. We've talked to a lot of vendors. We've applied for some special grant money to help subsidize the cost of electric vehicles, but we are not contemplating the purchase of any such vehicles in the 23-24 school year. And we'll keep a close eye on this over the coming years to ensure that the district makes the transition in the most economic and operationally effective manner. As you know, for our residents that live in Salina, there's a Salina library proposition that they'll have to consider. This is our letter from the director of the library. They're looking at a modest increase of about 2.3%, and that's about a 3-cent increase for those folks in Salina for next year. Let's talk about fund balance for a minute. So our unassigned fund balance at the end of June of last year was $9.3 million. As you folks remember, we asked the voters to consider in May. I'm sorry, I lost my M there. That's A of 2022. It's May. We asked them to allow us to spend $231,000 of that money, and we have done that for the junior high chiller project. And so we're projecting about $9,096,000 at the end of this year. That represents about 4.4% of our projected budget for next year. These numbers are going to change as we finalize the budget, but we will have the maximum amount in our fund balance allowed under New York State law. Now, I wanted to point out, though, also that if you look at this map, Central New York, on average, school districts have about 5.53% in fund balance. So we're slightly less than that. And you can look across the state. Most people have retained fund balances in excess of the 4% allowed by law. So just wanted to point that out. Regarding our reserves, the district's worked hard to build up our reserves so that as we talk about New York State going into a difficult time in the 24-25 year, we hope that our balance sheet is in a good enough shape that we can create a soft landing if, in fact, we get into some difficult times. As you can see, our reserves are not projected to go up much this year, just slightly based on interest. But we currently have $19.7 million in reserves. Reserves in Central New York, on average, school districts have about 18.5%. We had about 8.74, significantly less than the average, but more than we've ever had. You know, they're going to be critical for us as we navigate a soft landing after ARP and CURSA. Vote in election, same as usual. North of 481 folks will vote at the Cicero Elementary School. And for residents south, they'll vote at the administrative offices here on Taft Road. We'd also like to ask the voters, or ask the board to consider asking the voters to allow us to move our voting location from Cicero L to the high school this May. And so that's going to be an additional item should the board decide to have that on the ballot. If we can move the voting to the high school, we can use the stadium in May. And I think our folks at the Cicero Elementary School would appreciate not having voting commingled with students during May. And so if that gets approved next May, this will be the last time we have voters voting for a school election in one of our schools. So as I said, we got a lot of work to do over the next 6 weeks. We'll be coming back to the board with information. Certainly, we're trying to work with our budget subcommittee over the next couple of weeks, working with our directors and our principals and our department chairs to understand the details of our budget better and look for opportunities to close that gap. We look forward to a budget presentation on the 20th of March, where we'll present our final tax cap, give you a budget update, ask you to approve the bus bond proposition and the notice of budget hearing and election. And then we'll continue to work until April 10th, and we'll ask the board at that time to approve the proposed budget. On April 17th, we'll have to approve our BOCES election and budget vote. That'll be a special meeting of the board just for that purpose. And then May 2nd, we'll have the budget hearing. May 16th, we'll have the budget vote. And that's the budget timeline. We've got a quick Micron update, but maybe before we do that, are there questions that the board has about the initial budget?
Thanks. I don't know if I'm reading the chart wrong on what's the blue line on page 10 where it says economic status. It looks like it's going up, but is that?
Oh, good. That's, thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes. So do you see the 42.1%? So 42.1% of our students are eligible for free and reduced lunch pricing. And so as that percentage goes up, it means that our community is not as wealthy as it might have been in 2015. This is a double access. So you have your enrollment on the left side, and on the right side, you have the percentages. And so you can see our free and reduced lunch rate went up, our students with disability rate went up, and our students that are English language learners, that population went up as well. That's a good question. Sorry, I didn't clarify that more when I presented the chart. Any other questions or comments? I know it's a lot to absorb. Okay, sure. Dan, I don't know if you want to quickly just talk about Micron, just to touch base really quick. I've got a couple of slides here that might be worth just mentioning.
I do
where
have
we
a
are.
question for you before you.
Oh,
jump.
sure. I'm sorry.
No worries. You mentioned there's 2 million deficit, and then there's the 2.4 million that was for, what was that, the buses,
Yeah, the buses are 2.4 million, right?
which would make it essentially a 4.4 deficit.
No, well, the buses, that's a separate proposition. So if with the buses, we would ask the voters to approve that. And so that's a separate proposition. So if the voters approve the bus purchase, we would get transportation aid that would pay for about 80% of that cost. So that one, we don't have to, that 2 million, we don't have to worry about. It's just the 2 million in the general fund. And you might say to yourself, well, geez, we got all the state aid. How did we end up with this $2 million deficit? Well, we moved 3.5 million of CURSA money into the general fund. So that the expenditures, I should say. So we have to cover 3.5 million of CURSA expenditures. We also have the pay increases of 3.35 that were contractually negotiated, which got, in light of where we are with inflation, seems like a pretty reasonable pay increase for next year, or a good deal, I should say, in light of where we are inflation wise. And then the other factor is that our health benefits are going up about 10.9%. That's the other big cost for us. So when you add up all those increases and you try to absorb CURSA, it just throws us into a $2 million deficit. And again, we often start this process with an initial deficit. So we've got a lot of stones to turn over and things to look at to try to navigate our way through that. Any other questions or thoughts? Dan, I was just, some of these are repeats on Micron, on just, I don't know whether you want to comment.
Sure.
I think we've continued to meet with them, and
We continue to have discussion with them, and we were able to host a few representatives recently and get them the lay of the land, so to speak, as far as that the plant is entirely in the North Syracuse Central School District. They were able to kind of see the flow on Route 31 and the proximity of where the high school is and where the canteen is. But we did have discussions about chip camp. But some of the other things, as far as girls going tech, we did have some conversation about that, but also showing them the relationship with North Syracuse and BOCES and the other surrounding districts, and how working not only with us, but with BOCES, as we're looking for students in the trades and the workforce, they will be meeting with representatives from BOCES so that BOCES can look at programs that would affect all of the districts in the OCM consortium. With that, Don, I'll pass it back.
yeah,
to you
just to talk quickly about the pilot. I mentioned pilots. Well, you saw that we have about $679,000 worth of pilot revenue. We know that the county is working with Micron to negotiate pilot agreements that would impact our school district. And so it's just important to note that no matter how much we get in pilot revenue, the way it works in the tax cap is that pilot revenues reduce the tax levy. So regardless of how much we get in pilots, we're not necessarily going to get additional revenue from the pilot. And so we've asked the county to consider having us in those conversations, just to make sure that that everybody's aware of the implications on the school district of any pilot agreement that would be negotiated. And it was good. We were very lucky to have a few folks from Micron Economic Development visit with us, and so that message got carried back to Micron, and we're hopeful that that the pilot agreement will be negotiated in a manner that supports our taxpayers, supports jobs in the community, and also ensures that the school district will have enough revenues to support any increase in population, and support those incremental students. So that kind of concludes our slideshow. Any questions or comments at this point?
I do have some comments. First of all, Don, I know this is not an easy job. With your, please let your business office know we appreciate all the work. Also with Jason, looking at all the staff and the amount of money that we spend there, and obviously Chris Leahy and Mr. Bowles. This is, to me, an excellent budget. We have work to do. When I opened up my PC the other day and saw 202 million, but then I realized about inflation and so forth. Some positive things, and you don't have to go back to the slides. First of all, the tax levy, that is lower, and that's because the state has come through for us. I remember that being up to 54, 55% over my time on the board, and Michael does too. That is low. So that's less that we have to ask for from the taxpayers. That's a good sign. The other chart, which is just preliminary, very preliminary, looking at full value, assessed value. When that comes back to us in August, that is usually lower. Sometimes it's higher, and it's usually my town that's the highest. But when Don says $68.83, it's usually lower than that when we come back. So that's just a general thing. The other thing is, you mentioned April 17th. Unfortunately, all of the 23 component districts must vote on that night on BOCES election and candidates. I'm suggesting not to rush to April 10th. If for some reason, you want to take your time with this budget and look at it very carefully. If we have to meet the 17th, we're going to be here anyway. So it gives us 2 times to discuss this budget. And then the last thing I wanted to say, and to me, it's a star. Yes, we may have declining enrollment, or yes, we may have enrollment that's plateaued, but the needs of this district and the needs of the student population are not what they were 20 years ago. My neighbors would go, I can't understand why my tax. Believe me, come to a school and see what we do each day for special needs kids, for our English second language, and so forth. We have more things that we need funding for. So I have confidence in this. Michael, you can tell them that we looked at a deficit of 10 million one year here. So I know this team will work hard and we'll get it down. But thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Don. Moving on to comments from the audience. We do have a speaker tonight. Karen Calkins, come on up, have a seat. Just to remind everybody, the board always welcomes comments from the public. So anytime you need or want to speak to us, just sign up on the Friday before.
Mrs.
And-
Calkins, there's a hand mic there you may want to turn on.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Is that?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Karen Calkins, and my children have spent 8 years in various fine arts programs in this district. In addition, I volunteered for 7 years on the marching band board, with the last 3 as being president. As my child is getting ready to graduate, I would like to share my thoughts on this program, and there's other parents here with me tonight that share the same. I would like to begin that we have the utmost respect for the athletic director. As the second largest school district in central New York, he has a very large organization that encompasses athletics, co-curriculars, and extracurricular activities. However, the athletic director's focus is on athletics. The fine arts program needs and deserves a director focusing on their curriculum, scheduling, administrative presence, and ensuring the program is cohesive. Tonight, we would like to respectfully ask that this board consider adding a fine arts director in our district. The majority of schools around us do have both an athletic director and a fine arts director in their district. We are in the minority of combining the positions, and with the size of this district, it does not make sense. In addition, these areas are so diverse, the needs for fine arts students are not always a priority, and they affect students feeling that they are not equal to athletics. The district has a wonderful music program. However, there are no instrument repair or maintenance contracts to ensure that instruments are tuned and working in all of our schools. At times, parent volunteers have had to repair instruments like mellophones by cannibalizing older, non-working instruments so a student could perform. Instruments are aged, breaking, and sometimes beyond repair. This summer, the marching band received 3 sousaphones from the district, and we thank you. However, the old ones that the kids were using were from the 1992 Olympics. We have many instruments that are much older than this. And remember, the marching band is a national class champions. The marching band parent group has recently purchased some instruments, but please, we need district help. Then there's scheduling. Fine arts are in desperate need of an advocate when conflicts arise and to ensure all activities are given priority. In the spring, indoor percussion has the gyms, but when it rains, the softball teams get them, leaving the music students to practice in the hallways. In the fall, the marching band had limited time on the turf, and even a paid non-district soccer program had priority during their band camp. The Festival of the Arts was planned during a Winter Guard competition. They perform every year. This weekend, for example, the musical has practice scheduled inside of CNS. There's also an indoor percussion home show with 19 bands coming at the exact same time. That poses a conflict. This scheduling will only get worse as CNS undergoes construction in the next few years. In addition, there's no coordination when planning events like concerts, even in the same school. There was a concert planned the same night as the Music Honor Society Triumph inductions. In conclusion, co-curriculars and extracurriculars are such a large part of this district, and they impact so many students. A director is needed to give this district commitment and support to these students and the parents as they do the sporting events. As president of the marching band, I always invited Mr. Bowles to special events, and his presence was greatly appreciated and meant so much to parents and students. Sometimes it's the little things too. Athletics are acknowledged on the sign in front of CNS, but not on the wins of the competitive extracurriculars. Not even on a home show day when there are approximately 3,000 people on site, and it's one of the biggest events hosted by CNS. So again, as the second largest district in the area, we need this and our kids need this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you'd like to leave that with our district clerk, they can distribute it to the board if you'd like. Of course. Okay, moving on. Do we have any Board of Education committee reports? Mr. Thorne?
Yes, our next policy committee meeting will be March 14th.
Mr. Crabtree?
The legislative committee will be this Wednesday. And we'll be looking at the budget for the parents and students and so forth. Let me go to BOCES right now. So, okay, but it's gonna be a little longer than usual. I just wanted to say that we have what is called the Skills USA competition. We had it regionally, and 4 CNS students are placing first through 4th, and they will be competing at the state fairgrounds. This is probably one of the greatest events I've ever been to. So if you've been to the state fair, take every building at the state fair and put high school students from all over New York State that are interested in trades. It's amazing. So congratulations to Hannah Houston, Clarissa Fake, Caleb Howard, and Cecilia Wood. They will be representing our BOCES in our district at the state fairgrounds. Next week is the adult education graduations, which will be 2 days, the 7th and 8th. And this is where we see adults who have continued on in technology and so forth graduate, and it's a great night. Jason, he had one of his people graduate, and it's a great program. He would tell you that. Our annual meeting, which Jill will put out to you, is April 13th, 6 o'clock at Thompson Road. And this will be where our superintendent and deputy superintendent will go over the budget that you will vote on April 17th. We only vote on the administrative budget. You don't vote on capital and so forth. Michael will tell you the food is excellent because our students serve us, and hopefully a lot of us go that night. It's only about an hour long, and it's wonderful. Virtual Learning Academy, you know, we've talked about that for many years, or not many, well, a couple of years. And I want you to know that there is a graduation coming up, and one of our students will be graduating. Matter of fact, already graduated because January is over. And that there'll be 21 more Virtual Academy graduates in 2023. Any questions from any of you about what's happening at BOCES? Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Superintendent Bowles?
Thank you. This past weekend, we watched an exciting game with our girls varsity basketball are moving to the sectional finals. They will be playing Liverpool this Saturday. They won a thriller at OCC in overtime against Auburn. Our boys unfortunately ended up losing to CBA, and they are currently out of sectional play. We did have student Kennedy Thomas went to states as a sophomore, did not end up winning, but he was listed as the most valuable wrestler overall, which was a great accolade for Section 3. Our track team is going to states this weekend, and that will be in Staten Island. Our hockey team ended up losing in the semifinals to Beeville. And our wrestling team, just so that everyone knows, they won what they call the Triple Crown. They won in the duels, the Class A, Class AA's, and the individual. And that's something that they have not done in quite some time. And again, our programs are working hard. CNS had the North Star Pride, and many students were listed for the values of the Pride, what they're looking for at the high school as far as student characters. And the Roxborough Road Middle School Student Council had a Valentine's Day Spirit Week for the teachers and staff at NSCSD and raised $250. So those are some of the things that have happened over the last week or so. Thank you.
Do we have any board comments?
I attended the combination band concert at the junior high. First time seventh graders were involved. It was grades 7 through 12. Unfortunately, I was a little late and I missed a little bit, but I got to tell you that Ms. Siemens had a musical number. I get emotional about this. And she invited many of the marching band students to participate with this. And they played, I listened to it every Memorial Day, but the Armed Forces hymn. And as they played each of the Armed Forces, men and women stood up and were honored. That was a great concert. And I try to go to as many of the band competitions as I can. You know, Terry and I have talked in a subcommittee about some other topic, but one thing is to bring some groups here to present to us. There's a group up to the high school, and I apologize, I don't know the exact name, but it's Mental Health for Athletes. These athletes have just as much stress as teachers and other people, and they have joined a national organization, and they had a table set up for the boys basketball game for 2 nights. They had it, and they also had it the hockey. I'd like to have them. I know Hannah Boyle is on our track team, and there's a gentleman, a young man that's on the volleyball team, and he's on the tennis team, I think. I'd like them to come and I'm sure Terry would love to see this, what they have done with mental health and with sports. I just, little presentation would be wonderful. And the last thing I attended was Saturday at the South Bay Fire Department, being a member of the Optimist and having a club at the high school. We volunteered along with the Builders Club at NS. And it was called the second annual snowmobile rides for special needs. I did not get on a snowmobile. I got on the fire truck, but I did not get on the snowmobile. And what a sight to see the faces of these kids riding a fire truck or riding a snowmobile. And the high school kids, we had making sand sculptures and we had button making, and we have bowling, and what a great event at the South Bay Fire Department. And it was a great thing to be at and to see. So we got a lot of things going on. I am on Facebook. I don't want anybody going there, but a gentleman wrote that, and he happens to be a member, a really high member of a church nearby, and his kids go to Lakeshore, and he said, I have never felt so positive about a community and what you do. So we should be proud. We should be proud.
I do as well. Exciting news, actually, for those who know Tony Brackley. She'll be rejoining the Cicero Youth Board that supports the canteen and our next meeting. And the canteen, one of the reasons for that is the canteen has grown so much. The kids that are coming there, they're reaching record numbers. And I think part of the reason that is because the mental health support that comes along with going to the canteen. The canteen speaks with Dan Bowles and the principals of the high school and junior high. So we're coordinating efforts. We have a monthly meeting, coordinating the efforts to see how we can support each other and finding the kids that need the support. And there's a lot of them, and it's overwhelming, but we're doing everything we can. We've got volunteers, we've got people coming in, social work comes in to help these kids, and they are embracing it. So I'm very excited to say that Tony will be rejoining us at our next meeting. We couldn't meet last meeting, so I did not know that. No, that's fantastic. And, speaking of food, the canteen accepts donations for food, and the kids are eating there. So they do get a dinner meal there, which is, sometimes that's all they eat that evening. So that is very important too. It's another service that the canteen offers the kids.
So Mr. Crabtree, I believe it's Mrs. Couliard leads that group at the high school with the athletes that you're referring to. So that's something that we can touch. Yes.
Quick question, Terry. If one did have food to drop off, when is a good time to deliver to the canteen?
I would reach out to Amy Crowley and ask. I can get you the contact information, but time I would say would probably be about 3:00.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to routine action items. Can I get a motion to put routine action item A, consideration of approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of the Board of Education for February 6th? Ms. Segru, Mr. Thorne, all those in favor? That's passed. I'd like to combine B and C together, classification and school placement for disabled students. Do I have a motion for B and C? Beth, Terry, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Item D, consideration of classification for placement in students in home instruction programs for recommended by the Home Instruction Review Committee. Do I have a motion to place that before the board? Dr. Kramer, Ms. Kruger, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Item E, acknowledgement of the business office reports for January of 2023. Do I have a motion? Mr. Thorne, Ms. Segru, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Discussion action items. Item A, recommendation to amend the 2022-2023 North Syracuse Central School District calendar. Dan, do you just want to briefly explain what we're changing?
What we're changing is the date in June that is actually a region state that needs just to be acknowledged. I believe that is June 1st on there. It needs to be underlined, and that's the only change to the calendar.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to place that before the board? Dr. Kramer, Mr. Crabtree, all those in favor? That is unanimous. B, declaration of marketable and non-marketable surplus. Do I have a motion to accept that? Dr. Kramer, Ms. Kruger, all those in favor? That is unanimous. C, resolution to create a .2 speech therapist position at the North Syracuse Early Education Program. Mr. Thorne, Ms. Segru, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. D, recommendation to approve the final 21-22 non-resident tuition rates. Do I have a motion to bring that before us? Mr. Herman, Dr. Kramer, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Item E, request to approve the corrective action plan by the district's internal auditors regarding extra classroom activities. Don, do we have anything on this? Just a routine approval?
No, it's just a clarification. The New York State auditors asked for a clarification. Really no material change to the plan.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? Mr. Thorne, Mr. Crabtree?
I do want to comment before we vote. This comes up every year, and let me tell you, it comes up all 23 BOCES, is that the taxpayers have to know that the chaperones do not take the notes, and they don't keep track of the treasury stuff. It has to be done by students. And we have Mr. Lucia at the high school that is phenomenal. But again, keeping track of receipts, you probably know in the band, people know keeping track of receipts and things is not easy. So this comes up for every school district, and you do have to do a corrective plan.
I will say though, Bob, that being on the audit committee, our auditors have told us that we do a phenomenal job in this area compared to some of the other school districts in the area. So I think that's it. And we have a lot of activities, but we do have folks that are really like Mr. Lucia that are really helping. And I think that's a testament to our work. So that's before us. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Item F, approve the extension of the 2019 to 2023 contract between the North Syracuse Central School District and the North Syracuse Principals Association for 1 year to expire on June 30th of 2024. Do I have a motion to put that before us? Dr. Kramer, Mr. Crabtree, all of those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. We have some gifts this evening. It looks like we have some a wheelchair that's been donated to the early education program, $5,000 to replace some equipment at the early education program playground. And RIT has donated some equipment for Project Lead the Way at CNS. So do I have a motion to accept the above gifts with gratitude? Dr. Kramer, Ms. Kruger, all of those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. We have one retiree to acknowledge tonight. Francine Finezzi, a teacher aide, retires with 22.3 years of service. I'd like to wish her a healthy and happy retirement and thank you for all of your service here in North Syracuse. Do we need an executive session before we take personnel items A, B, and C? Okay, we'll start with personnel A. Do I have a motion to accept personnel A as submitted? Mr. Thorne, Ms. Segru. All of those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Support staff personnel B. Do I have a motion to acknowledge personnel B as submitted? Ms. Kruger, Dr. Kramer, all of those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And administrative personnel report C. Do I have a motion to approve personnel C as submitted? Mr. Herman, Ms. Kruger. No. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of reviewing 4 legal matters with no action to follow and 1 personnel matter with no action to follow. Do I have a second? Ms. Segru, all those in favor? That's unanimous. And meeting adjournment, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Dr. Kramer, Mr. Thorne, all those in favor? That's unanimous. We're adjourned. Thank you.